Hi, Dan here from Healing Associates, and welcome to the first in a new series of videos where we ask business specialists to answer the questions we get asked. So joining me on this first video is Kay and Becky from Peas in a Pod Consulting. You guys are HR and business consultants, so welcome to the show. Well, thanks for taking the time to come and talk to us. And one of the reasons that, we love working with you guys, and I know you're super geeks in terms of the expert field that we're talking about today, and that is employing people. So one of the things we get asked a lot by clients is, I'm thinking of taking on, been sole trader for a while, or I'm a one-man, one-lady limited company, and now I'm moving into the area where it's too much work and I want to take on my first employee. That's kind of scary. And as accountants, we get approached about all that all the time. We can help them with payroll and the other things, but I think that is a much wider discussion than just physically how do you get a pay slip to somebody. So what I wanted to ask you guys about is, what should I be thinking of as a new business when I'm looking at employing my first worker?
Okay, yeah, we get asked that a lot, and I think the first thing that we always assure any new clients in that situation is that this is a really exciting time for them, and they're not necessarily supposed to know this stuff. We work with a lot of people that are specialists in their own fields themselves. So the accountants that started up their own practice, the personal trainer that started up their own gym, the mechanic that started up their own garage. The field of recruiting people and ongoing performance management and leadership is a really, really scary area for a lot of people and requires a completely different skill set than ones that they might have ever had to possess or use in the past. You're absolutely right. It's a really, really daunting area for some people in that situation, but a really exciting stage where people are looking to grow their business, and inevitably that means bringing more people on to help them do that. I think one of the key things we always start with is making sure that their business identity is very, very clear to themselves, to the people that own those businesses, because if they can't portray and they can't explain the identity of their business and what they stand for and their ethos and their values, then they're never going to be able to effectively hire someone that they can be assured is going to reflect that ethos and those values. So we start with a really, really clear, detailed and robust job description for the role that they're recruiting for. And that doesn't just cover what we call the technical competencies, which is how you're going to do the job and what technical skill set you need to be able to be competent at it, but also how they're going to do the job. And that's very much what we term as behavioural competencies. So the way they're going to do it. That is a great starting point for anyone that is looking to bring a role in. So they are very, very clear about what that role is, what it does, and how it's going to perform it. And then you can use that job description to then inform the job advert that you put out. Yeah.
Which seems quite important. I mean, you guys have helped us work with our own for the same reasons, but you see some brilliant ones online where it's kind of, you're going to be doing all this, etc. And it's kind of like, well, what does that mean to the person coming to the job? So yeah.
It also optimises your opportunities to source the best potential candidates for the role as well, in terms of making sure the keywords, the job title is clear, all the things that some people don't think about, that people use recruitment search engines when they're looking for roles. And also it's remembering as well that although you are offering a role out, and that's a very exciting time for the company, and it's really important for you to choose the right person, we're in a day and age where it's a job searcher's market now. So any candidate that comes to work for you is choosing you as a company as well, and how you reflect that company, and a package of employment that you're offering is actually really important. So it's really important that you think those things through.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that immediately, as a new person, where you're just think a new business that's looking to employ somebody, you're worried about the financials. Can I afford this? Can I do this? What's the legal requirements? But oddly, the first thing that you guys as HR and business consultants have looked at is, well, let's talk about how you're going to portray yourself as a business. And I think it's that kind of viewpoint on it which is so important to do. And it's certainly something that we've seen you guys work with us and with other businesses on making that a more presentable outlook as a business.
It's funny, often we are brought in when a bad hire has been made, and we deal with the symptoms of that situation. The person isn't performing in the way that the employer wants them to, the tasks aren't getting done properly, there seems to be a lack of clarity around what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis, and you can normally trace it right back to the steps that they decided to take when they were recruiting. And it's really important, like you're saying, they almost need to take a step back from, I need someone, I need the help, I know it's too much from me, and really think about the tasks in the business that they can delegate. And we often talk about delegating tasks, not delegating control. And the mindset that you need to be in as a business owner needs to shift from a business owner mindset to an employer mindset, because all of a sudden you're having to package up this business to sell to somebody else. But you're also having to look at the tasks that you're going to delegate and the risks that that entails. So you need to decide, what tasks they're going to be, what sort of person you want in your business, how you're going to assess their competency, and that you can trust them to do them, but also allocate time to how you're going to manage that entire process, not just through the recruitment, but on an ongoing basis. So you are going to have to give a little bit of capacity to somebody else. And I think sometimes that process gets missed in the recruitment process, that really thinking that long-term arrangement through and how that's going to not only impact your business, but you as a business owner, and having to change the way you think slightly.
Yeah, no, I can see it, and I think it's having the experience of doing this myself. I think sometimes you think, oh, do you know what? I'm really, really busy, and I could bring someone on right now. Yeah, okay, we can probably afford it. But you're right, thinking about what is actually they're going to do when they start. How much of what I'm doing am I going to give away? And as you say, it's your business, your brand, everything that you're bringing somebody into the fold to do. So looking at from the beginning with all these things and with expert guidance, I think it's quite an important piece that often gets overlooked. Obviously, as accountants, we get asked, can I afford it? And of course, we can tell someone that. But it's this more holistic view, I think, of it.
And don't get me wrong, I think also when an accountant gets asked, can they afford it, you're looking very much just at the cash flow forecast and all the financial figures. We look at it from more of an operational perspective. So it's quite clear cut for us when a company owner wants to recruit somebody into a role, and that role is directly tasked with making money. So in a business development role, or taking on some client work, which is effectively billable work, that's really, really clear cut. It's black and white. But there are some occasions that we find where the investment it's in a business support role. So for example, our own company, we've brought on 2 virtual assistants. Now they don't take any client work off us. They don't take on any billable work, but they take a lot of tasks from us, which then increases our efficiencies as consultants, and then enables us to take on more billable work because they're taking on a lot of the business administration. So it's having that wider thought process when you're considering the question, can we afford to do this? It's not just the figures on the paper, it's also what efficiencies are we going to create that then will eventually, albeit indirectly, make money in the longer term. And that's very much an investment in itself.
Oh, I agree with you, yeah. And then we talk about it a lot inside with everything we talk about, which is invest, don't spend. And very much where people are concerned, I think you have to be going through the process you've just described, sure that what you're getting is an investment. And then as you say, it's looking at that, okay, I can't afford it now, but what is that? If, from our point of view, we would look at, can you cash flow the time it takes to get them to speed and get them to the point where, using your example, they've got up to speed so that you can go and earn more money, or the owner can go and earn more money and they can do this new role. Or if they're coming in directly charging, how long does that look before they can actually charge? So yeah, no, I think you're right. And what about the one thing we always get asked, of course, after this is, what have I got to do? Like legal things. I mean, how scary is the legal side of all of this?
Compliance is incredibly important. You need to make sure that you are protecting yourself as a business and carrying through a robust process and consistent process, not just for what we've said about making sure that you get the right hire at the end of it and it fits your business model, but also that you tick the compliance box and you legally protect yourself. So my motto has always been hire slow and fire fast, if that's within the legal realms to be able to do so, of course, yes. So one of the first things is to have a really robust recruitment drive in place. We've always very much advocated on an application form process as opposed to CVs and covering letters. One, because the amount of information, variation of information that you are considering on a CV-based recruitment process can vastly differ. Whereas if you have a set application form template, everybody has to fill it in with the same information. So, and that then ticks the box to ensure that you are considering the same information from every candidate.
Brilliant.
From a discrimination perspective. And it's cleaner. And it also requires the candidate, from an operational perspective, to put in more effort. Mm-hmm. They have to fill in their employment history. They have to write a supporting statement about why they want the role. Yeah. And the amount of effort they put in can often be quite a direct reflection of some of their own behavioural traits, and that tells you quite a lot about the candidate just by how much effort they put into the application form. So we always advocate with starting with a nice, consistent application form. It's then really important that you are objectively assessing and shortlisting as you go through the next steps. So you shortlist from your application forms, the people that you then want to come in and see an interview or to do a presentation, whatever your recruitment process looks like. And it can vary and be longer or shorter, depending on the complexity and the seniority of the role that you're recruiting for. So we work with clients on a recruitment drive by recruitment drive basis, and what that recruitment process looks like differs depending on the role that's being recruited for. And it can be personalised as well to make it appropriate. I know you like to do something within whether you do a pop quiz.
Oh yeah,
which I kind of like. Yeah.
So we have a few quick fire questions that we do that helps us, I suppose, assess how they would fit in culturally. Is probably the best way to describe it. Yeah.
And that's great, and we love that, and we love it when we get to work with clients on recruitment drives, and they've already put in their own little personalised aspects of it, and we can always fit that into any recruitment drive that we do. The most important aspect of following through a recruitment drive as somebody that's recruiting is being objective and fair in their decision-making criteria, considering criteria that is effectively non-discriminatory and based on the competencies of the role that you have laid out in that original job description. So that's what that document then becomes. It becomes that reference tool that you use throughout when you're making decisions. The interview process, we have seen a variety of different interview techniques, haven't we? From a 2-hour assessment centre to a 4-minute chat in a coffee shop.
Yeah. I love it. I'm a fan of efficiency. Yeah.
Which is great.
That's why I did the recruitment, but yeah.
Which can cause problems, because if you're not asking the same questions to all the candidates, and those questions are not inherently competency based and based on the job description and the role that's going to be that's being recruited for, then how effective you can be in terms of making the right decision and coming to the decision as to who the right candidate is based on a very limited amount of information, or information that's not necessarily directly relevant to the job role and the competencies of it, can be limited, and that's something that we very much advocate, a nice detailed interview script that we help put together with candidates that's based on the job description and keeps the relevance of the questions to that role itself, and the ethos of the company and whether the person's right for it or not. So and it makes it much easier from that point, after you've interviewed everybody that you wanted to see face to face, to then come up to then reach a decision based on a very objective scoring based system on how they score at each interview question as to who the right person is for the role.
Fantastic.
So it's a process that should guide the right operational outcome and the right operational decision.
Good, and that sounds like, as you say, there's a lot of when people and clients talk to us about compliance, their initial thinking is, am I doing anything right? Contracts of employment, of course, comes up, but what it sounds like from your description, of course, is it starts a lot earlier than that. It starts with, have we got a robust job description, like you say? Do we know what we're hiring? Then the process of how can we make sure we're not targeting ourselves or causing ourselves any issues with discrimination or anything else, and we've been fair through the process on using application forms, as you say, and then the actual interview questions themselves need to be appropriate by the sounds of it. So all quite interesting areas of risk, I suppose, from an area.
Well, you're right, because we then move on to those more traditional concerns in terms of areas of risk. So at that, once you've done all of that and you've then got that person that you've offered the role to, the next step is the real compliance list. So you're looking at pre-employment checks. So that would be your right to work in the UK. That would be any background checks that's required or regulation checks, depending on the type of work that the person's going to be doing. ID checks. Have I missed any? References. That's a really important one. Because again, a person can perform really well at interview, and you get that one side, but what their old employer says about them, which, to be fair, in this day and age won't be more than a confirmation of the fact that they performed a role for a certain amount of time. But even then, that it's important that you do that to make sure that you've covered their employment history.
So another big tip in there would be ensure you get references, presumably.
Absolutely, yes. Because if employers don't give references as well, sometimes not giving references can tell you as much as a detailed character reference, which you are unlikely to get in this day and age.
I can imagine it's time. A lot of it.
Yes. There's some of your key immediate compliance checks that you need to do once you've decided to take on an employee. The next thing, you're absolutely right, is putting together what everybody refers to as a contract of employment. However, for simple roles, employers assume that they need to have a contract of employment. They don't. They need to have what's called a statement of particulars, which is key T's and C's relating to the job role that is being offered. And that can be a 1 to 2 page document that just provides that statement information. Contracts of employment are a lot more detailed and contain a lot more policy clauses and things. And they're usually more detailed depending, again, on the complexity and the seniority of the role. So it doesn't need to be a laborious task putting a statement of particulars together, but it's something that is necessary and has to be done by law has to be provided within 2 months of the person starting. So that's worth
There we go, the key timeline, right?
Yes.
2 months to start, Although presumably we like that before they start, right?
Absolutely, yes, because it gives them, and ultimately if people are, there's the operational consideration here of quite a lot of the time somebody won't hand their notice in of a previous role until they have that information in writing as part of a job offer. So it's really important that you know that stuff and you've agreed the salary and you know what the job role is and you know what the hours of work is and you've done all of those negotiations and had all those negotiations at the interview stage or at the post-interview conversations, so that can go straight into a written document.
Brilliant. And that sounds like, from a compliance point of view, you'd say they were the key points?
Yeah, those and employers' liability insurance. You're then moving into your world of health and safety. So you've got to make sure you have the right insurances in place to become an employer, and also key documentation. So health and safety policy. How you immediately have a duty of care when you become an employer, and it's important, especially in high risk environments. Warehouse work in factories, places like that, where the job roles that are being performed are high risk. Those roles need to be risk assessed because you have a duty of care as an employer. So that's an immediate consideration as well. And then lastly, and this is closely linked to your statement of particulars or contract of employment, whichever one you've decided to put in place, company policies. And they serve not only to tick boxes from a compliance perspective, but they are also very clear performance management tools that dictate very, very clear and detailed sets of criteria and standards by which you expect any employees coming into your organisation to adhere to. So as a new employer, you have some legal ones that need to be in place straight away. So you need to have a disciplinary policy that sets out a fair and objective disciplinary process. You need to have a grievance policy, so staff members know what to do in the event that they've got a complaint or a concern and they need to raise it in a formal way. And thirdly, GDPR. So the whole new world of GDPR.
By GDPR
right.
So,
Employees are legally entitled to know how their personal information is being stored and retained by their employer. So that's important too.
Brilliant.
And then we very much recommend additional sets of policies be put in place depending on the nature of the business. So you might need a whistleblowing policy. You might need a confidentiality policy. We also recommend sickness absence policies as well because that can be a key area that we get brought in to deal with quite a lot, which is pans across every industry. Yes,
definitely.
Yeah.
So that sounds pretty scary to somebody who's first employing when you listen to it. And it's a little bit like when people listen to us talk about tax. They're like, I just thought I had to fill in a few boxes. Oh yes, well there's 22,000 pages of tax law. You guys are similar with the same, which is you've got this policy, you've got that policy, and it can sound quite scary. What would be your advice to employers generally about this process? Do you think it is actually in practical terms? Is it a scary thing?
I wouldn't say it's a scary thing. It's a necessity. a bit like the accountancy thing, which is a minefield to us. There are lots of resources online, and most of the clients we come across have accessed those resources and interpreted them to varying levels of success. You can go on ACAS, you can go on DirectGov, and you can find templates that you can use for the key policies that you need to have in place and the contract of employment or the statement of particulars. And that's okay. What we would always recommend to any new business that is employing for the first time is that they do get some advice, even if it's just on a small budget, just an hour with a specialist to check over what they've done. So by all means, put the time into the research yourself. It's like I say, you can delegate tasks, but you can't delegate control. And as a business owner, you need to understand what you're taking on when you're employing somebody. So get clued up, do the research. Once you've put together some stuff, just have it checked, just to make sure that it covers you. And sometimes that's, well, always from a compliance perspective, but more often to make sure you've covered in the event of. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. You often don't rely on the bits of paper until something goes wrong. And we've talked about a lot of good practice, and we talk about that for a reason, because there's so much more to it than just the compliance stuff. But it needn't be scary. But my advice and Becky's advice would always be bring in an expert, even if it's just a check.
You don't know what you don't know. And I have, even yesterday, I was looking over a contract that one of my new clients had put together for a fixed term contract. Nowhere in that contract or that statement did it refer to the contract being of a fixed period. So although the verbal agreement was that the post was only going to last for 9 months, nowhere in the contract did it say that.
Okay, yeah.
So there's an immediate risk there.
Yeah.
And it is that you don't know what you don't know.
No.
So if the documentation doesn't reflect what you've agreed in person, that's when you can make yourself vulnerable. So, and that's why you should always have someone check out, even if you put these documents together yourself.
Yeah.
I, like Kay said, always recommend that you get an expert to look over them.
And as you say, there are, a bit like there are with tax and a bit like there are in your guys' field, I presume there's a lot of information online that's will get you a good feeling for what you should do, but ultimately, for your specific situation, I would agree with you, it's worth speaking to an expert for a little bit of time, even if it's just the investment of that to make sure you're protected. I mean, it is a big thing, isn't it, taking on an employee?
It is, and it sounds laborious, but it's not. When you're talking about 3 policies and a statement of particulars, that's not a lot of work, even if we were to be brought in to put that together from scratch. Investing in that to make sure it's done properly, it can save you a lot of heartache in the long term. And if operationally you've done everything else that we've said, then that's a very easy task for us to do.
Fantastic. Good, and that sounds like there's some great tips in there for anybody looking, and hopefully it gives a bit of a feel for the responsibility of taking somebody on, but also that with the right help, it's not too drastic. I mean, have you got any final parting words for people that are looking to take on these first employees? Any words of wisdom?
I think I have. I think from an induction perspective, because what we've discussed, everything up till now has been up until that point where that person is effectively signed off to start their first day. The impression that you're giving to that new candidate that first day they start work is incredibly important. And I think a lot of people get to that stage and they think, job done, that person's about to start. We've ticked all the boxes, everything's in place. However, they haven't necessarily thought through the induction process. One of the things we always make sure goes in a statement of particulars or a contract of employment is a probationary period. A probationary period is, for all intents and purposes, an assessment period for you to assess whether that person who said they could do all those wonderful things at interview and on paper does do all of those things in practice. So having a very, very clear and targeted probationary period of often 3 months, 6 months, depending on what's in the individual documentation, is very important, and we like to put in place with our clients what we call 90-day goals. Mm-hmm. So it's what the key things are that employer expects that person to know, to have done, and to be competent at the point where their probationary period review comes up. And if they can prove that they've got to those standards, then they've effectively passed their assessment period, and then they go on to becoming hopefully a long-term employee. Not investing in that part that first 3 to 6 months. Even things like putting a buddy-in system together with a mentor, so you've got another employee who's a mentor, making sure that you've done things like you've ordered their laptop and a mobile phone, and you set up a desk with a rubber and all of those little things that make that new employee feel important the first day they walk into your office, creates that really lasting impression. And we've all heard the saying, first impressions count. It won't necessarily be their first impression, but it will be their first impression of actually being an employee in your environment, in your workplace. And it's important that you invest your time and your thought process into making sure that's a good impression.
Yeah, sounds like it. And as a numbers people, we'd always look at the cost of bringing the actual recruitment process and bringing somebody on, and say not managing the initial period and having to do that all over again is a costly exercise. So,
yeah, absolutely. And a really demotivating one as well. So yeah, that would be my tip.
I think just adding to that, I was going to say the probationary. When you come to confirming someone in post at the end of their probationary period, make sure that that's the right decision. There are HR implications of not confirming someone in post, and again, that's probably one of your pinch points to get some professional advice. If you're thinking, I'm not 100% sure, therefore I do not want to confirm them in post, I'm either going to extend this probationary period or fail it. Doing that, you need to have your evidence, you need to be sure that the decision is justified. So that would be another point that I would bring in an expert. But we come in far too often where there has been an underperformance issue or a behavioural problem, and the person has been in post 8 months and there was a 6-month probationary clause in their contract, and we asked the question, at the point that they were ending their probationary period, did you not think to extend it? And they say, no, I just confirmed them, I thought it was a tick box. That's not what a probationary period is. It is a period of assessment, and therefore when you come to the end of that period of assessment, you need to be sure. So that's another point I would just make. Yeah. Before you confirm in post, be sure you want to confirm in post.
Or employers are so busy that they bypass that date, that 3-month date or that 6-month date has been and gone, and no meeting was held to discuss that person's performance, which had become an issue by that point, and that's when
when problems start.
Yes, absolutely. So we would focus on the probationary period. Yes.
Well, that sounds like there's some amazing tips in there, so hopefully everybody's found this really useful. So thanks both for joining us.
No,
I'm sure we're going to do another video talking about the next part of the journey in terms of scaling up and some of the wider topics, because it's quite a wide topic, isn't it?
It is, yes. We find it very exciting, but as you said, we're super geeks.
That's it, yeah. Everybody's got their chosen fields, right? So yeah. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, so thanks very much. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to look further down the series, there's many more on there and many more to come. So check those out, subscribe to the channel and tell all your friends about us. That's it. Thanks very much.